Hi, today I thought I'll be addressing some of the questions of the followers, so particularly the questions by Munisa. All right, she says that her reading and listening scores are stuck at 8.5. The question is how to make those a band 9, right? Right. Before we can discuss how to make anything better, we need to understand what we're doing wrong in the first place. I mean, not everything obviously she's doing wrong. There are certain things that she's doing properly well. That's why she's getting that remarkable and amazing 8.5. So kudos on that. But at the same time, if you're getting that 8.5, it means you are making 2 to 4 mistakes. So again, analyze carefully why and what kind of mistakes you're making, right? Either on your own or with the help of somebody who knows better, your teacher maybe, or a tutor, right? Like usually when I look at my students' answers and their mistakes, I can see why and where they made mistakes usually, you know? But I also encourage them to think for themselves, like where they made mistakes and why. When you ask people where they made mistakes, the common answers are like, oh, I just got distracted, or I just didn't know vocabulary. While those could be true, they may not always be actually the case. So that's why, again, deep, very careful understanding of the part of the mistake would really help, or the whole thing. Okay, so or some people simply look at mistakes, they just count the number of mistakes they made and they just dismiss, that's it, you know, like, oh, I just had 8 mistakes, or I had 2 mistakes here and there, and that's it. Or they talk about the nature of the mistakes, like, oh, it was a true false not given and I had like 3 mistakes there, they're usually tough for me. Or, oh, it was a multiple choice, I had 4 mistakes and they were tricky, and that's it, they move on. So when you approach the analysis like that, it doesn't really help. I mean, what are you learning, right, from those mistakes? I want to learn from my mistakes, okay? The mistakes are actually great. They are there to tell us what we're doing wrong and what we could do to make it better, what we need to learn to make it better. So if we do not pay attention to them, if we ignore, then we are also ignoring the important lessons. So that's why definitely start there, okay? Since I cannot look at your work and see why or where you made mistakes, I would just remind you of the common errors in the reading. So definitely the first one is a language problem, a vocab or grammar, like misunderstanding or thinking that you know the word but you actually don't. Or understanding grammatical structure sometimes can be tough, because there are some really complex grammatical structures that can change the meaning if we're not attentive enough. But it's not always language, you know, so that means there are other areas that result in errors. So that could be a concentration problem. And the concentration is divided into several factors. One is the external obvious ones, you know, the noisy environment that does not help us understand something better, or internal problems, like we have certain personal issues, right, that keep us like bugging and we can't really concentrate on what we're reading. But the third one, where people report lack of concentration on the reading, is they know the words and they're in an ideal environment, yet they cannot understand. It could be because the passage is just so complicated. The topic is abstract, or the passage is very technical and too many details to understand, like to follow. Okay, so when such factors happen, I try to make things very simple for myself, like easy and simple, just the main points. I ignore the details. Now, I do have certain approach to working with such passages, and I will talk about these in the future videos. But for now, I just wanted to encourage you to take a hard, encourage you to take a hard look at what you're doing wrong, if you can do that on your own. Because that could be just enough for you to improve your scores, really, okay? Because at a higher scores, or when you want that perfect 9, we don't want any maybes, right? We want everything to be right. So the stakes are high. You need to focus on every tiny little thing. No question is too small, you know, and you can't ignore them, okay? All right, so I will tell you 2 cases from my personal experience where I made these mistakes and see if they apply to you. Several months ago, I did this one reading, and I finished the passage as I usually do. I mean, I finish it really quickly, and I have plenty of time to check and triple check my work. But because it was just a test that I was kind of doing it for myself, it was not under exam conditions or anything, I finished the test and I thought, well, I don't want to double check or anything. Come on. I mean, I'm at this level already where I can just answer the questions, and do I need to keep proving to myself or double checking that I got the answer? So I was a little bit, snobby or overconfident about my performance, and I just decided that I would just stop there and I would check my answers. And lo and behold, I had 2 mistakes. And I was surprised a little bit. I was like, really, what? 2 mistakes? And I looked at each one carefully. I analyzed the first one. As I analyzed, I realized that I missed one part in the question in the middle. I just read the statement at the beginning, and as soon as I was reading it, it felt like, oh yeah, that was true, definitely. And I went, it was true, that's it. I didn't even double check or think anymore. I didn't do that. I moved on to the next. And another question was also jumping to conclusions, really, okay, without carefully thinking about the question or the answer. I relied on a earlier part of the paragraph because I remember reading that part and having that idea. And as I read the question, I was like, oh yeah, sure. I mean, it was matching some information or true false. I don't remember really the nature of the question itself, but I remember the mistake, the nature of the mistake. So relying on that first part of the paragraph, I thought that the answer must be whatever, and that was wrong. When I learned, the answer was actually a little bit later. So you can see how, again, I jumped to conclusions, right? Now, in both of these cases, what could have helped me? What I would normally have done under exam conditions with such questions, I would have definitely double checked. In the first case, if my answer was right away true, I would have to prove to myself why it's not false and why it's not given. In the second one, if I thought that the answer is based on this part, I would have to read the whole paragraph because one paragraph is one idea. And if there is one idea at the beginning, that idea might change in the second part. So I can't just jump to conclusions like that and assume that the answer is whatever that I think it is. If I think that that's the answer, no problem, but I have to prove it to myself, with evidence from the text, which I did not do, right? So having made such mistakes, I realized, okay, so as always, I gotta, prove it to myself that my answer is correct, okay? So it's like that. When students make such mistakes, or when they look at answers when they're working with choices, say multiple choices, they choose the answer quickly, they read the question, they got the options, and as they read, they're like, okay, the answer is C. Got it, next, that's it. But that's not what I do. If I'm choosing the answer C, then it means I can prove that it's not A, nor B, nor D, okay? Do you see that? So there's constant, or there should be at least, that constant analysis, careful analysis of the options or the questions. And if I'm thinking that the answer is C, not only do I have to prove that it is C, I should be able to prove, or I should be able to prove to myself that it is not the other options with the text. If you look at the options carefully, you realize that some of the options are just wrong. There's something wrong with them, like one part or one word or the idea. Or another option can seem like they seem right, okay? Factually, it's true, yeah, you exactly read that part. But when you look at the question, that part is actually not related to the question. It's not answering that question. And one of the options will be just completely not given. I mean, you read it and you're like, I didn't read that at all, I don't know. And then one answer, the correct answer, it's going to be well paraphrased, okay? It has the idea, but not as much the language, actually, because the wrong answers will try to include as many distractions as possible, and those distractions are in the form of same vocabulary maybe sometimes, or part of the ideas, okay? And we don't notice those distractions when we just read quickly, or when we assume, by just reading the first part, we think oh, that's the answer, where it's not, okay? Because the correct answers are well hidden and well paraphrased statements. Okay, so that's why whenever I'm reading, whatever I read, the questions or the text, passage 1 or passage 3 or passage 2, I'm constantly reading and paraphrasing and simplifying. And when I'm working with the choices, I'm constantly analyzing why this is the answer, that's not the answer. Okay, it's like having a debate. So I wear two hats under exam conditions. When the stakes are high, I wear the hat of a candidate who's just doing the test, who should just do the test. At the same time, after I finish the test, I'm wearing the hat of an examiner, you know, that critical examiner, or the teacher, like, that asks me why that's the answer or why that's not the answer. I should be able to prove to them that whatever I have is correct. Okay, so that takes a lot of critical thinking during the process. And if this thing that I'm talking about right now is a little too difficult, you could start applying that with easier passages, or with one passage at a time, or just those questions where you're not so sure. Okay, that's about it. Okay, I hope this helps. And one more thing to consider to help you understand like where I'm coming from with my suggestion, or with the way I look at things, is this. If you had a health issue and you went to the doctor like for a solution, right? You ask, hey doc, I have this headache, give me a medication. They wouldn't just give you a medication, like any random medication that they would give to anybody else with the same symptom. Ideally, they would analyze what's happening, what's wrong, why you have this particular headache, right? And based on your individual factors, or based on the root causes, then they would recommend something. So the same case with the reading, okay? So we don't want to just jump to certain random solutions. We want to think about why the mistakes are happening, what are the problems, what are the causes, and based on those factors, we want to address each problem on its own merit, okay? That way, I believe you would really improve your scores, and you would also have more confidence on what you're doing and how you're approaching the whole thing.